Now that we've got our embouchure set up and we've checked off some of the common issues and made sure that we're getting our first sound, we're going to talk about articulation. All that means is that we need to start the note just like how we're talking. We use our tongue to make things really clear. We do the same thing on the clarinet. So we use our tongue to make the beginnings of notes a little more clear. Check out the difference. This is without a tongue, and this is with tongue. Just a little more enunciated, just like if I were to talk without my tongue. If I were to talk without my tongue, it doesn't sound very clear and it's harder to understand what I'm trying to convey with my words. So, pardon me. There are a few different approaches to tonguing, and many people talk about it differently. So one common, we're going to talk about the different ways to approach tonguing and kind of what I want you to go with. So the most common one that people will talk about is top of the tip of the tongue at the top of the tip of the reed. And so it's a little tongue twister, and so that would be is not quite the tip of your tongue, but a little bit behind that, and not quite at the tip of the reed, but a little bit behind that. And so that's one way to think about it. Everybody has a different mouth shape, people's tongues are different, and so this might work well for some people and it might not. So try out what works for you. And the second, and this is a good transition to the second ideology, is follow the sound. So you might talk about a toe articulation. That's something that we'll talk with brass players a lot. You might hear the word ta. But you might also hear for clarinet, what might work well for you is thinking about D or knee. If you say those words and then you think about having a reed in your mouth, knee, D. That might be another thing that works for you. And so try different syllables, and as long as you're getting a percussive, clear beginning to your sound and it's easy and it doesn't feel like you're trying too hard, then one of those syllables, or thinking about top of the tip of the tongue, one of those approaches to tonguing on the clarinet might work for you. The last approach to tonguing is called anchor tonguing, and it's kind of a different way of thinking about it. Instead of thinking about here's your tongue, here's your mouthpiece, instead of thinking about just starting the note with your tongue, you actually think about your tongue being against the reed every time that you're not playing. And so you're thinking about starting with your tongue here, releasing your tongue and blowing air, and then putting your tongue back when you want to stop, and then, pardon me, and then but keeping the air going, or thinking about keeping the air going. And then anytime you want sound, you just kind of open up that valve. I'll demonstrate. There are certain situations where that might be valuable, but when you play in my bands, I would prefer that you only start notes with your tongue unless you need to play really quickly, like a line of staccato notes, which we're not going to talk about. So I just want you to be aware of the different types of tonguing and the different approaches to tonguing, because you might hear them all when you talk to different clarinet teachers. So again, focus on what sounds clear and percussive and what is easy to do. Kind of the best way to think about this, in my opinion, is it's a quick, small, comfortable movement of the tongue that takes as little effort as possible and gets the best sound. So experiment with all these different syllables, all these different approaches to tonguing, and take what you believe is the best musical decision.